This video is about placing figures in LaTeX. It corresponds to the first part of section 7.10 in the Applied Analog Electronics textbook. Let's take a look at how we put a figure into LaTeX. And here I've done a modification of the template that I provided the class. And I've got a section here with some text in it, and I refer to a figure there, figref block. And then to actually have that figure appear, I do a begin figure, end figure environment. And inside that environment, I have a number of components. The first command there, centering, just says that I want everything that's within this figure to be centered horizontally, so it doesn't appear all at the left margin. Then I do include graphics. The include graphics, which comes from the GraphicsX package, is the thing that actually places the figure itself. It has an optional argument, which can be a width or a height. Here it's 70% of the text width. And then there's a file name, generic block diagram, which is one of the files that I have over there on the left. In fact, if we make a little more room here for this, to the left we can see it's generic block diagram .pdf. So we can see that it is PDF format. I didn't have to specify that in the source code here because it knows to look for PDF files and JPEG files. But you can actually specify that there if you want to be explicit that I want the PDF version of this. Every figure must have a caption. And the caption here, I've got a short version of the caption which is used for the list of figures. Since this document doesn't have a list of figures, that can just be generic. Then I have a label. And this label, fig::block, is how I will refer to the figure. In fact, if you look up a few lines there on line 64, there's figref block that is referring to this figure. The figure is automatically numbered, and I don't have to worry about, gee, if I insert a figure or delete a figure, all my numbers change. It doesn't matter. I'm referring to it by name, and the number will be changed automatically. Okay, you must always have a caption, and the caption should be a full paragraph. It's not a title. It's not a one-word description of what's there. It is a paragraph that explains the point of the figure. Why the hell are you showing this thing to the reader? What are they supposed to get out of it? So make sure that the caption explains the point of the figure. And if you're copying the figure from somewhere, which you shouldn't have to do very much in this course because all your schematics should be your own, all your block diagrams should be your own, all your photographs should be your own. Occasionally maybe you will copy something from a data sheet or something, so there will be, in rare instances, some copying that's allowed. If you copy, you must, in the caption itself, say that you have a copy. It's copied from, and then say where you copied it from. If you don't explicitly acknowledge the copying right there in the caption, it's plagiarism. A citation alone is not enough. A citation just says, oh, some information came from that source. If you actually copied from that source, you must make it very clear that it is a copy. And anything less can get you kicked out of the class. If you're doing something that's not an exact copy but is pretty close, that you took something and modified it a little bit, that's known as adapting. And you say in the caption, this figure adapted from, and say exactly where you got it and do the citation there. You have to either say copied or adapted if what you have is not your original work. If it's all your original work, then you don't have to say adapted or copied. But if you redrawn something, you take something and say, oh, I saw this thing and I just redrew it. But it's the same thing really, I just redrew it. Say adapted from. Don't claim somebody else's work as yours. That's plagiarism. Explicit acknowledgement right in the caption. Okay. Like I say, most of what you're going to be doing is original work, and so this isn't going to come up very often. At least I hope not. Important thing. You notice I had that fig ref up there referring to the figure. Every figure must be referred to in the main body of your text. If you don't refer to it, then it's not there. Because what happens is the figures float. They don't appear exactly where you say begin figure, end figure. They move to the bottom of the page, the top of the page, making room for the text. And so they need to be generally on the same page as the first place you refer to them. If you never refer to them, then they don't belong in the report. Every figure must be referred to. Okay, so when they float, how far away do they go? They can go to the bottom of the page, the top of the page. In this case, we're on the first page, and the top of the page has a title block on it, so we couldn't float to the top. Let's take a look at what this looked like. So, switching over to the output for this thing, we've got the title block at the top, that first section, which was very, very short. I don't want to see sections this short in your reports. And then if we scroll down, we see floating to the bottom of the page is that figure that we referred to. And it looks kind of like this big empty white space here in the middle. What should be there? Well, it might have been nice to start section 2 there, because the room for section 2 here, why not just put it in? And you can do that. In fact, if we go back to what we were doing in Overleaf and go all the way back up to the top, what we've got is on line 10 here, use package section above place-ins. Place-ins says place the insertions so that they don't cross, here I said section boundaries, so that section 2 header, the figure wasn't allowed to appear after the section 2 header, so the section 2 header had to wait. That's because I only said I can move figures above a section header, but I can't move it below a section header, even if it would stay on the same page. So if I change this and say, well, let's allow it to go below also. All right, and now I recompile this thing, and let's take a look at what that does. Now section 2 is allowed to start because I allowed the figure that was referred to here in figure 1, still on the same page as the reference to it, but I can start section 2. I'm allowed to go below the section 2 header with figure 1. And figure 2 and figure 3 that this section referred to don't appear on this page because there wasn't room for them. If I scroll up, I can see that they get moved, they floated down to the next page. And that's generally what will happen with figures, is they will float to the next page or the next page, or however far it takes until you get all the figures out. And that's why this place-ins package is very useful, because you can say, all right, don't start the new section unless you can get the figures out. And in the book, I use the section above below, which is the settings that I'm showing here, so that I don't have a lot of empty white space in the book. The sections can start as long as I can get the figures out on the same page before, even though the next section is started. If you want to have a somewhat more open appearance, and you want to make sure that your sections, nothing ever crosses a section boundary, you can take out the above and below in the use package options there, and just say use package section, place-ins, and then the section headers become very strong boundaries, keeping figures from floating past them at all. Okay, so when you place the figures, let's take a look at how the figure 2 and figure 3 came, because notice figure 2 and figure 3 are referred to up here, but they didn't appear until the next page. How did I specify them? Well, if we go back to the source code and scroll down to the section, we referred to on line 79 here, we referred to figure series chain, and then immediately put the figure right after the reference. And that's a fairly common way to do this thing in the source code, is to say, hey, I want this to be close to that reference, put the figure here right next to the reference. And I kind of did it the other way around for the next figure. I have the begin figure, end figure for the figure wires, and then on line 102 I have the reference to that figure. So here the figure is specified before the reference, whereas for the other one it was specified just after the reference. But the effect wasn't really that different between these two. If we go back to looking at the output, we can see that both figure 2 and figure 3 get referred to up here at the end of the paragraph, but we have to go to the next page to get either of them. So they're treated more or less the same way. Okay, and as you can see, I've got photographs here. This was a JPEG file, as well as PDF files for the line drawings. Okay, so begin figure, end figure, environment is how you put figures into your report. You put them in there near the first reference to them, and LaTeX takes care of floating them up to the top of the page or down to the bottom of the page as appropriate. Don't use the square bracket H option that some web sources will recommend for figures. What that does is force the figure to be frozen with respect to the text and not floating. And that generally ends up being very awkward once you insert or delete things. It just doesn't handle it well. So don't use square bracket H. Always let things float to the top or bottom of the page. Okay, figures come out near the first reference. There must always be a reference. There must be a caption. The caption must be informative. It must tell the reader what they're supposed to see. And don't just describe the picture. Tell them what the point of the picture is. And if the figure's copied or adapted, you must explicitly acknowledge that in the caption itself. Okay, that's probably enough for now on placing figures. We'll talk more about how you create some of the graphics for the figures in subsequent videos.